Last week, rabidly conservative author and commentator Bethany Mandel was promoting her new book, which dedicates an entire chapter to calling out wokeness when she was asked a simple question, to define what she meant by woke. In a clip that, as she predicted, went viral, she completely choked on her answer.
What does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
This became the occasion for all kinds of different people to air their own views about wokeness. Not surprisingly, many seized on Mandel's flub to insist that there is no such thing, and no real danger posed by wokeness on the left. So in today's installment of our series, Woke Idiocy versus the Revolution Humanity Needs, we are going to show just how wrong this is. Woke insanity is real, and it is doing tremendous damage. It is disorienting and paralyzing huge numbers of people, especially students and youth, who urgently need to be thinking critically, seeking out the source of the very real and intensifying white supremacy, male supremacy, destruction to this planet, and imperialist wars that are built into this system, and to the real solution to all this in an actual revolution. Ironically, despite very different political programs and visions of the world that they each hold, this wokeness has a lot in common with the fascists, and as Bob Avakian has insightfully analyzed, the two actually reinforce each other, even as the fascists are far more dangerous and pose the far greater threat to humanity's future and are carrying out much greater violence right now and preparing for an actual civil war. Let's take apart three key dimensions of how this is so, and take a lead from Bob Avakian on what is needed instead. First, the wokesters and the fascists both take up an epistemology that is a framework for understanding what is true that denies objective reality. Both insist that the truth is whatever they say it is, or whatever serves their political objectives. This is not just unscientific, this is aggressively anti-scientific. Think about it. The fascists still insist that the 2020 election was stolen. Their ranks are chock full of unthinking Christian fascists who deny the basic fact of evolution. And they include QAnon conspiracy theorists convinced that Hillary Clinton and Tom Hanks are running a child sex ring. All the mountains of evidence that disprove their fantastical theories? Dismissed as fake news. For their part, the wokesters often speak to real phenomenon, such as the oppression of Black people. But their view of how you find the truth shares a lot with these fascists. The wokesters insist that there is no truth. There are just different narratives for each individual or each identity group. We've all heard this a million times. You have your truth, I have my truth, she has her truth. The wokesters openly argue that there is no such thing as objective reality. Tema Okun, for example, in a paper that is widely wielded by these wokesters, openly classifies objectivity as part of white supremacy culture. This wokeness shuts down any substantive debate over what's true, insisting instead that only those who directly experience oppression, or as they like to call it, marginalization, can understand what it is or what should be done about it. Others are told to check their privilege, shut up, and just follow behind whoever is deemed to be the most marginalized, with no real consideration for where they are leading.
If you want to know if you are going the right way, follow women of color, sisters and brothers. We know where we need to go, and we know where justice is.
If you want to know how to get there, wherever it is you're trying to go, follow women.
Follow Black women.
As Bob Avakian put it in his piece, BIPOC Leadership, there is no such thing. Quote, of course, People who are oppressed have a lot to say about the effects of that oppression, and that is obviously important. But understanding where the oppression comes from and what to do about it requires most fundamentally taking up and applying a scientific method and approach to dig down to the underlying causes of things. And it is that scientific method and approach that will enable people, whatever their identity, to lead things where they need to go. All this points to this crucial fact. What is of really decisive importance is not what identity people may be part of, but what is the content of their ideas and programs. And if those ideas and programs are taken up and followed and implemented, what would this lead to? Second, both the wokesters and the fascists are trying to make the system of capitalism-imperialism work to their own advantage. The fascists have grown out of and are a hideous concentration of the ugliest and most defining qualities of the system of capitalism-imperialism as it has developed here in America. Its foundational and unresolvable white supremacy, its vicious male supremacy, its anti-immigrant xenophobia, and its celebration of American supremacy. They are a response by a powerful section of the rulers of this country to the profound crisis their system is facing. And they are moving rapidly to shred norms, ransack fundamental rights of the people, and remake society in the service of their gruesome MAGA program. For their part, the wokesters have a political program of striving for inclusion and representation of the so-called marginalized within the system of capitalism-imperialism. And wokesters attempt to force any opposition to injustice into the service of this objective, often very directly insisting that it is them or those who look like them who should get hired, get published, or get elected to power as the ultimate goal. This has led, and can only lead, to masses of people getting played again and again. Seriously, on this 20-year anniversary of the illegitimate, unjust, immoral war on Iraq, do you really think it makes one shred of difference to the Iraqis whose homeland was invaded and bombed and millions displaced that Colin Powell, who played a decisive role in lying the U.S. into that war in the first place, was the first Black Secretary of State? We don't need new inclusive faces atop this murderously oppressive system. What is needed instead is to seek out the roots of oppression in this system itself and fight to end this oppression for everyone all over the world by overthrowing this system and building a radically different system and new world. Third, this fascist lunacy and woke insanity overlap in their morality. Both are willing to trample people and their rights in the service of their goals, and both, in different ways, are fighting for their share of American privilege. The fascists are fighting for the forgotten white male to regain his place atop the American empire, lashing out against any rights that have been gained by Black people, by women, by LGBT people, or others. In the service of this goal, they are using the power of the state to trample the rule of law, to steal the right to abortion, to terrorize trans youth, and they are unleashing violent mobs against anyone standing in their way. For their part, the wokesters use social media mobs to tear people down and cancel them, depriving them of public platforms, getting them fired, ruining their reputations, often for minor or completely subjective reasons, and often simply on the word of someone from among an oppressed group who accuses them of some transgression. Meanwhile, these wokesters insist that they themselves be guarded against any triggering phenomenon, sheltering in safe spaces that hide from the real world, not only ignoring, but indulging in the privilege that comes from living in the USA, a country whose wealth and power rests on brutal exploitation and oppression throughout the world, backed up by the massive violence of the American military. So to be clear, once again, it is the fascists that are by far doing the greater damage and who pose the greater threat to humanity's future. But this wokeism is an enormous straitjacket on many, including especially youth and students who urgently need to be standing up against and fighting this fascism as part of getting organized for a real revolution. And the more extreme and lunatic the expressions of this wokeness become, the more they are giving fodder to the fascists to seize on. Hardly a day goes by that Fox News doesn't feature some lunatic wokeness gone wild to to whip up their fascist base to wage their war against any and all calls for a more just society and world. The danger of this dynamic is captured well, even if in a way that itself embodies anti-trans bigotry, in a tweet from a fascist former congressman from Iowa, Steve King, that Bob Avakian has highlighted in several of his talks. Quote, "Folks keep talking about another civil war. One side has about 8 trillion bullets, while the other side doesn't know which bathroom to use." King is pointing to the actual, real possibility of civil war and mocking the way in which this woke stuff is totally disarming those who will be the targets of it. We cannot allow this dynamic to continue. Our side desperately and urgently needs to completely break out of this wokeness and any defensiveness in the face of it, and take up the serious struggle to understand and change this world, the real world, in the interest of humanity as a whole. To that end, these words from Bob Avakian in his piece, "Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating," provide direction and leadership.
Instead of staying in your lane and going for self,
I stay in my lane.
Always put you first.
while this system is moving to even more decisively crush any hope for a world worth living in, people need to be looking at the bigger picture, focusing on the greater interests of humanity and the possibility for a far better world, and acting to make this a reality. Instead of snarking and sniping at each other and being divided by identities, people should be working to unite everyone from every part of society who can be united in the fight against oppression and injustice, with the goal of putting an end to this system that is the source of this oppression and injustice.